Hello everybody, my name is Andrea Wiles. I am a Beef and Sheep Extension Officer in Charleville. In the last video we discussed what the different terms on a label mean. If you missed it, go back and watch it now. Using the same label, we will work out exactly how much each ingredient actually supplies and how that compares with what we might be trying to achieve. We'll do the sums for stock eating 100 grams for simplicity, and then we'll compare it to an expected intake for this lick later. Starting with crude protein. This lick contains 16% crude protein. In 100 grams of lick, 16% of 100 grams means they will get about 16 grams of crude protein. You can work this out for individual protein meals if they are listed, but it is most simple to do it on crude protein. How about the urea? This lick contains 12% urea. In 100 grams, 12% of 100 grams is 12 grams of urea. Each gram of urea is equivalent to 2.87 grams of crude protein. So 12 grams of urea is equivalent to 34 grams of protein. If there are multiple nitrogen sources, it may be simpler to just do this calculation on equivalent crude protein. If you do this, you don't need to multiply by 2.87, as this has already been done to calculate the equivalent crude protein. In this example, all the equivalent crude protein is coming from urea, so the answer will be the same. For energy, there is 5 megajoules metabolizable energy per kilogram. So in 100 grams, or 0.1 kilograms, there is 0.5 megajoules ME. So even if stock ate a large amount of this supplement, for example 500 grams, 5 megajoules ME per kilogram times half a kilogram is 2.5 megajoules ME per day, which is 4% of the daily requirements for a late pregnant cow. So we've worked out what the lick is supplying. Now we need to have a think about why we might be feeding it. This needs to take into account what the pasture is supplying and what our stock need, so we can set our targets and see how it stacks up. One example might be heavily pregnant stock in late winter or spring. In this case, there may be some standing pasture, but it will likely be low quality and lacking protein. Pregnant and lactating stock have a very high demand for energy. So although our pasture might be most limited in protein, our stock might be most in need of energy. This gets a bit complicated, so it might be worth thinking about diet quality testing, or NIRS dung sampling and phosphorus testing. This is a definitive way of identifying and calculating your primary limiting nutrient between protein, energy, and phosphorus. It is cheap, around $100, and can be done through Symbio Labs. That will tell you what the stock are getting from the pasture. Then work out the demands of your different classes of stock by heading to the Future Beef website. After doing the sums, we know there isn't much energy in this supplement, so it's a protein supplement. This lick may supply the energy requirements though by increasing intake of pasture, increasing the overall supply of energy and protein. So let's see how it adds up for a late pregnant cow. On the left is our supplement label. The next column shows what this lick will supply each day in their predicted intake. We did our sums before on 100 grams, but the recommended intake for this lick is 300 grams, so we'll work on that now. You should be able to find this on your label as a percentage of body weight, or grams per head per day. You will see the sums for 300 grams pop up as we go along. On the right are the total daily requirements for a 450 kilogram late pregnant breeder, which are found on the Future Beef website. You now know the total crude protein is the sum of equivalent crude protein, in this example completely supplied by urea, and crude protein. In 300 grams of this supplement, 102 grams of equivalent crude protein and 48 grams of crude protein is 150 grams of protein per day. This should be enough to increase pasture intake and therefore supply some extra energy and protein. The difference between what the supplement supplies and the total daily requirements might be filled by a dry season pasture. But to really know the answer to that, we would need to do a diet quality test. 6 grams of phosphorus is a reasonable supplement for moderately deficient country. Depending on your country, you may require more or less. Again, fecal testing would be useful here. The calcium has been set in this lick to balance with the phosphorus, and it also supplies a reasonable amount of the daily requirements. As for energy, if the supplement and subsequent increased intake of pasture didn't meet energy requirements, an energy supplement might be needed as well, such as hay, molasses, or whole cottonseed, which would be fed in much larger quantities. To know if this lick was appropriate, you really need to know more about the property and the stock, such as the body condition score of the cattle, how much pasture there is, browse in the diet, and how long you might be feeding for. We can do the same for this lick with a breeding ewe. In this case, the expected intake for this lick is 30 grams, which also would be shown on the label. So it will be supplying 15 grams of protein out of their 190 gram total daily requirement. The calcium and phosphorus supplied is moderate, but it would depend on the pasture to know if this was sufficient. Additional calcium may be required, particularly if feeding twin-bearing ewes in early lactation when milk fever might be a concern. But again, we need to know more about the production system and pasture available to know if it is a suitable supplement. Generic licks often look cheap and are easy to get, but they may contain expensive ingredients you don't need. Think about the nutrient requirements of your different classes of stock, the time of year you feed, and what the quality and quantity of your pasture is, to work out your primary limiting nutrient. You can then compare different feeds online to work out how much they cost per unit that you are looking for example, per unit of energy. I'll leave you with some handy links. All the websites I mentioned during the presentation should be listed here. If you still want more information, contact your local extension officer and they can help you apply this to your situation.